There are no American boys here in fatigues, dousing their shaven heads with canteen water as they sit on the long grass, applying pressure to cork the holes in their brothers. There are no helicopters that litter the Delta with new soldiers, who will scuttle and bury themselves into the muck like blue crabs. There is no gunfire, no explosion that will rip off a foot. No one is named Charlie. Today, no boys will be addressed as "Sir," as they are loaded into choppers that reek of old blood and fresh vomit. It's not 1960, and President Richard Nixon has long since been dead. But even today, the name Tricky Dicky is still sexy to say. Make no mistake, this is Vietnam. It's been decades since a Jimi Hendrix guitar solo has been played on this countryside. My father, the emaciated guide, and I wade through the tall grass looking for the cemetery. The jungle is a sauna, and the only sane things to wear are shorts and sandals. My father and the guide are bundled in jeans and tennis shoes. Sweat pours down my face, my back, and the sides of my ribs. Even the soles of my feet are sweating. I am a broken fire hydrant. I swat at mosquitoes feeding on the blood dripping from the cuts on my calves. Elephant grass has barbed edges. This, no one told me. My father keeps details from me. The guide mumbles something in Vietnamese as he hacks away at the vines and grass with a machete. What'd he say? The grass is used as a deterrent, my father says in English. How much further to the graveyard? No noisy, babe. Nothing, my father says. My grandfather said the reason grandfather was buried in a remote location was because he was important. A revolutionary soldier against Ho Chi Minh. I pictured him as William Wallace, fighting the English with the blue face paint, a kilt, and swinging a broadsword. Grandfather must have smelled like grass and dirt. The irony was that grandfather looked like Ho Chi Minh. Once, as a child, when one of my history books actually made it as far as the Vietnam War, I opened up a textbook to a picture that I had found of an old bearded man. I asked my father, "Was Ho Chi Minh your father?" He shook his head and told me I was silly. Even my father's friends, while drunk, asked in whispers, "Antan, is Ho Chi Minh your father?" "I'm your friend. You can tell me." "What was he like?" I asked. "I don't know. He and I fought a lot," he says, marching faster. "What do you mean you don't know? He was your father." "I left home when I was very young." I fall into the grass. "Be careful. They're snakes." My father says, walking away faster and growing even more distant. Snakes. The word startles me like the lizards that darted on the walls or the beast-colored spiders that crawled on my grandmother's outhouse. I only used the shed before nightfall and made a rule not to drink anything after sunset. I watched them march away. I looked like my father in the face. When people tell that to my mother, she says, "I'm glad. Maybe people will finally stop being so suspicious about me and the mailman." I inherited my mother's sense of humor, but unfortunately, I'm easily startled like my father. She says it's because we eat too many chicken hearts. At times, I also show flashes of his anger. I remember my father getting so angry that he took a butcher's knife and plunged the blade 3 inches deep into the wood. I don't remember what it was over or how old I was. I remember him leaving and not coming back for the entire day. My mother didn't tell jokes or cry. She held me as we watched The Thorn Birds, a film about a priest in the outback who falls in love. We watched until my father comes back. That night, he took me out to see The Empire Strikes Back, past my bedtime, as a way to say, "I'm sorry." When I look back on that night and on Darth Vader in his asthmatic voice, reaching for Luke with his cold metal hand, and then revealing that indeed he was Skywalker's father. I realized that to some degree, all fathers fuck up. I know grandfather was important, but why is he buried so far away? So people wouldn't desecrate his body. Desecrate? I think of vampires and werewolves and church ruins. Had my grandfather done something in life that was so heinous that people would consider digging up his body, what would they do? Stake his heart? Salt and burn his corpse? Urinate on him? What would they do to him in death that they couldn't do to him in life? Personally, I have never gotten a person that angry. At least the ones I've heard have done me the favor of forgiving me for forgetting who I was. When done right, the guide says, we're here. The graveyard is enclosed in a tall metal fence with barbed wire. The vines bubble out from the fence like varicose veins. With a key, the gate scratches open. The graveyard is an abandoned Eden. Debris covers the headstones, which look like broken bricks stolen from a castle. I look for the name Tran. Some of the graves are older than the United States. Some have just a name with no dates, no birth, no death. One simply reads, Beloved. I found it, my father calls out, waving me over. The guide lets himself out. This isn't it. It says Young, I say. That was our last name before grandfather changed it to Tran. My father says. He's sitting on top of another grave and touching his father's headstone as if it were young, soft, and could still feel. My father's nose is running as he looks at the broken stones. He says, after the war was over, we had to change our names. The Viet Cong were looking for your grandfather. I don't know what he did, but I was told it was important. He moved us away from all our friends to a small remote village and built a house and changed the name to Tran. It was impossible to find us. Everyone in the village kept our family a secret. Our guide is the son of a woman that your grandfather helped. Why haven't I heard any of this before? We don't talk about the past much. Your mother and I. Life was different then, because we only thought about getting through the day, and then on what needed to be done for tomorrow. We had outlived yesterday. What need was there in dwelling on it? Telling stories alone can't help. What was he like? He and I fought a lot. He wanted me to be more responsible, and I wasn't. I was rarely home. I lied about my age and left the village to join the military. When the war was over, I didn't go home. I fled Vietnam with the other soldiers for America. That's where I met your mother. I never wrote to my parents. Why? I ask. I'm standing over his shoulder as he reaches for my hand and squeezes until my fingertips grow red. Because I wasn't a good son. Your mother sent a letter home to her family and attached a picture of us, and it included the name of my family's village. They traveled to find my parents. That was the first time anyone had heard of me since going into the service. Before that, my parents thought I was dead. They had made an altar to me. 2 months later, I received a letter from my mother saying that my father had died. Is this the first time you've come back to see the grave? Yes. The last time I was here, the people didn't believe me. This time I brought an old picture of myself with my father. We look like each other in the face. I rub my father's head. His hair is warm, brittle, and coarse, but even in this heat, he's not sweating. My father's hair is more gray than black. I squat down on a tombstone next to him. He looks at the dried blood on my legs. There are scars from the mosquito bites. He takes a wet nap from his pocket and cleans off the blood. I forgot to tell you, to wear long pants, he says. They're just cuts. They'll heal. I look at the last name and see the word D-U-O-N-G. I want to make a joke about how I could have been David Dung. I imagine invisible people watching us, sitting on their names and birthdays. My grandfather is here, standing behind my father and smiling because his son has finally come home. In my mind, grandfather's not the type to say anything. He speaks with his eyes, which are swollen. My father said once, "I hope you have a boy just like you, so you understand," my father says with failure in his voice. I don't think bad or good applies to boys. I think it only matters when we become men. Are we good men? I want to say. But I don't. My father bends on both knees, brushes the dirt away, and kisses the worn stone as if it were a forehead.
David Tran.